Good day and welcome to this first part of this tutorial helping you get started with Juno Cassandra. In this tutorial we are going to discuss basic concepts. We presume that so far you've already done the basic prerequisites, which means that you've already installed .NET Core 8 on your computer and you've also installed Juno Cassandra Desktop and you are able to run Juno Cassandra Desktop without error. At this stage you probably won't be doing anything much in Juno Cassandra because you don't yet understand really how to use it, but we presume that you have gone through the basic steps. Now, if you haven't seen that, we have made a video dealing specifically with the installation of Juno Cassandra, and I'll put a link to that video in the description box below. The second step then is for you to download the tutorial data that we are going to start using for this tutorial. And that means you will download the tutorial data zip file, which is a zip file containing mainly CSV files and Excel file, and very important also a certain folder structure. And we're going to discuss that folder structure in this video. And I'll shortly show you where to download this tutorial zip file. And what you're going to do after downloading it is to unzip that tutorial data to a folder on your computer to which you have full read-write permission. That's quite important because otherwise, if you don't have full read-write permission, Cassandra won't be able to write output files from the model run to your working folder. So let's go and download the tutorial data from the Juno Cassandra documentation site. So here I'm on the Juno Cassandra documentation site, and I want to go to the Getting Started menu over here, and I want to go to Tutorial Data, and you just click on this link to download the zip file that contains the tutorial data. Now just a word to let you know that it may be that if you look at this video sometime in the future, this tutorial data page may have changed significantly and it may have additional tutorials on here. But for this tutorial, just go and search for tutorial 1 and click on that link to download it. Okay, so now that you've downloaded the data, we presume you're going to unzip it somewhere on your computer in a folder where you will have complete read-write permission. Okay, so now that you've done that, before we go into Juno Cassandra, let's head back to the PowerPoint tutorial, and I'm going to first explain some basic concepts to you. Alright, so we've gone through these steps here, and now what I want to present to you is the basic pieces of the puzzle, all of the different components that you have to put together in a Juno Cassandra model run. Now, as you can imagine, when you are dealing with an infrastructure project like a road network or a bridge management system with thousands of infrastructure components like road segments, etc., dealing with budgets of millions or even billions of dollars, the tools that you're going to need to use to properly model and analyze the future condition of that type of infrastructure necessarily is somewhat complex. So you just have to bear with the complexity of understanding all of these different pieces of the puzzle. Unfortunately, you cannot really escape from it. So you have to be quite patient and determined to go through this learning curve to use this sophisticated tool to analyze your infrastructure data into the future. So the first important concept is the concept of a project folder. Now, a project folder is a folder on your computer where you are going to do a specific deterioration and modeling analysis project. Licensing for Juno Cassandra Desktop is per project, right? So you would typically have a license for a project and you would say, I'm working on this project, and then it will allow you to analyze a certain number of modeling segments or modeling elements for that project. By default, Juno Cassandra Desktop has a trial project which allows you to analyze up to 500 elements in that project, and that's what we're going to use in this tutorial, so you don't need to have any license for this tutorial. The second concept then is a work folder. The work folder is a folder inside your project folder where you specifically deal with Cassandra. We'll explain that more in a bit more detail shortly. Then there is the workbench setup file. The workbench setup file is just an Excel template that tells Cassandra how your different elements in your work folder work together and so forth. Then there is model configurations, which informs Juno Cassandra what type of model you want to run, how long you want to run it over, and more details about, for example, which elements you want to debug in the model run and so forth. we'll go into that in more detail shortly. Then there is your domain model setup file, which contains the logic that explains how your domain model works. Your project setup file, which primarily contains your budget constraints and a few other things related to a specific project that you are working with. And then of course your model input file, which is just a simple flat CSV file with all of the required columns for your domain model setup. And then optionally you can also have a committed treatments file containing details of all the committed treatments that have already been assigned on your network into the future. Now in this video we are going to deal only with these first 4 components, and in future videos we are going to then discuss separately these other input elements that play a role in a Juno Cassandra model run. Okay, so first let's look at the project folder and the work folder. Over here I've got my unzipped tutorial data from the download that I've done. You should have a similar folder after you've unzipped it. Of course the parent folder in which you've placed it will be different from mine, but for the purposes of understanding the concepts in Cassandra, this is going to be our project folder, and this then our Cassandra folder is our work folder as far as Cassandra is concerned. Most of your input files, if you click on the inputs folder, you'll see there are some files that have been unzipped there, and those are the other components that I've mentioned, like your domain model setup file, your project setup file, model input set, and your committed treatment set. The other folders that you see here, in a normal case where you just create this work folder from scratch, you won't yet have a debug folder, an outputs folder, or a post-proc folder. Juno Cassandra will automatically create that for you, but you have to have an inputs folder. Just note that is plural with the S at the end, and that folder is a required folder inside your Cassandra work folder. Now let's look at it from another viewpoint. So here we still have our project folder and our work folder, and very important is what I'm showing on the right side here is also our folders. But you can see now that inside of the work folder, if you downloaded the tutorial data, you'll see there is a file called the workbench folder, and this is your workbench setup file. It's simply an Excel template that wires all of the things together so Cassandra understands where your different files sit. Now it presumes of course that your files are sitting in the inputs folder, but it does not assume specific file names. So for example, in a specific project, maybe you have 2 different input files. One is just for exploration and one is your formal one that you want to use for the modeling run. So you can switch from one input file to another by changing the names contained in the workbench file. Let's go and look what's inside the workbench file. So first of all, inside the workbench file, there is a mandatory workbench sheet. Note that it's all lowercase with an underscore between work and bench. And then you also have more sheets that I've given for you here in the tutorial file that are prefixed with the word config underscore. And these are your model configurations. We'll look into model configurations in a moment, but for now, I just want to look at the settings that you declare on this page. So for the purpose of this tutorial, our project name is going to be called trial project because that matches the project that is allowed on your exploratory license. And then you need to describe what is the domain model setup file, and these files are presumed to be in the inputs subfolder within your work folder. So these file names I've already filled in for you in this tutorial setup file. So you've got your domain model setup file, your project setup file. This is where your budgets and project specific information is kept. And then your input file, which is basically where all your starting data for the model run sits. And you can then have a committed treatments file where your committed treatments sit. And if you don't have committed treatments, just enter the word none or lowercase in this field. You also have an option to put a multi-column lookup file. I've just put none here. We're not using that in this analysis. Now you'll see that I've got 2 more elements here that are slightly grayed out. One is a license file path, that is the absolute path to your license file, and then also which configuration to run. Now There is a console version of Juno Cassandra that we're not dealing with here, and these two grayed out elements are only relevant for the console app version of Cassandra. So you can just ignore that. You can even delete it or just keep it in there, but you don't need to have any specific information in there if you are using Juno Cassandra Desktop. Okay, so let's go and look at the model configuration. So note now that I've now effectively gone to my config sheet here, and I'm specifically looking at the file, at the sheet that says config_forecast, and here are all of the different settings that you need to define for a configuration. Now in this video, I don't want to get stuck to discuss each of these elements individually. You can see I have here, for example, model type. And there's a drop, if you go into the Excel template, you'll see there's a drop down here where you can select one of 3 different model types, number of modeling periods, your initial calendar epoch, and then quite important is the budget sheet to use. See, there's a sheet name there, and you may find that in your tutorial data that you've downloaded, there is a different sheet, a different budget sheet specified there. As I said, I don't want to go through all of these settings now. My main objective with this video is to just get you started. But if you go down here, you'll see there's a link there that allows you to go to the help documentation to see what each of these configuration settings means. So let's go over to this link, and you'll just see what you will find if you click on this link in your Workbench file. So here I am at the documentation website, and you can see all of the different configuration settings are discussed one by one here. So if you could maybe consider as homework to go through this file so you get an understanding of what all of these settings in your model config means. Okay, so I'm back here in my Workbench file, and you can see the information that has been filled in here is basically defining the configuration that has the tag config_forecast, and I've got another one here called config_BCA25. You may find this looks a little bit different in the download that you've got because I've made a few corrections, but essentially the names of these sheets are the tags or the codes that define your different model configurations. Okay, so that's basically all of the pieces of the puzzle that you need to define in your Workbench to do a model run with Juno Cassandra. So now that you have a basic understanding of this, let's go and quickly do a model run. And then in later videos, we'll go into more details into what lies behind all of these different pieces of the puzzle. Okay, so I've got Juno Cassandra open here. And if I'm now going to select my Workbench file, you know now where that Workbench file is. I've got my Cassandra work folder here, and I just double click on the Workbench file to select it, and Cassandra will immediately load that Workbench file for you, and you should get this green check at the end that tells you Workbench is set, ready to run model. And it will show you also here what is your work folder. It automatically assumes that your work folder is the same folder in which your Workbench file is, which should always be the case. It shows you your domain model setup file, your project setup file, input file, and so forth. So now we're ready to run the model. So if we go to the Run Model menu over here, you'll see under Configuration to Run, there are 2 configurations. So it has automatically picked up all of the sheets in your Workbench file that are prefixed with the phrase config_, and it just removes that config_ and shows you the last part of your configuration tag. So if you recall, in our Workbench file, if we just go back here into our presentation, if you look at the model configuration or in the Workbench file, you can see I've got 2 tags here. One is config_forecast and one is config_BCA2, and the Cassandra will pick up all of these sheets starting with config, and it will strip out that prefix and ask you then which one of these you want to run. So here in Cassandra you can see I've got a forecast and I've got BCA 2.5. Let's run both of these, and then we can quickly have a quick look at the output. So I select forecast, I start the model run, and you can see it runs quite quickly. Now there's a checkbox here that says play sound when done. Now that is a useful feature because when you have a model that runs for a longer time, maybe a few minutes or maybe an hour or two, even if it's a really big model, then it's useful to run the model and you will get some sort of a cue when it's done, so you can continue with other work and it will let you know when it's done. In this video it makes quite a loud noise, so I'll just edit it out. So I've already done the forecast run. Let's go for the benefit cost analysis model with a budget of 2.5 million every year. I'll start that model run and you'll see that this is going to take quite a bit longer. It still runs for less than a minute though, because this is a really small model. We're only running for 20 modeling years and there's only 500 elements in the model. And you'll see as it runs, it informs you how it is, how many treatments are being assigned and how many elements are being treated and so forth. All right, so that model run is now complete. And just briefly, I'll just show you some of the post-processing tools. We'll do a separate video dealing with different post-processing tools, but for now, I just want to show you if we go, for example, to KPI forecast, it will show us our KPIs. And I'm going to first look at the KPIs for the model configuration forecast, which contains basically no treatments, just 3 different committed treatments, so very little treatments. And if I get the statistics for that configuration, you'll see if I look, for example, at my pavement distress index or my RUT, you'll see that it basically goes right through the roof. If I show the graph for that, you'll see there's no treatments to basically arrest the condition of the different parameters. The network is just deteriorating. Whereas if I go and load the benefit cost analysis model, which have assigned treatments, and I click on get statistics, then you'll see now my pavement distress index is held in check quite well by the treatments that have been assigned by the model. Another useful post-processing tool is the one called parameter forecast, which allows you to look at a specific parameter. I'll just go down and pick RUT depth and I'll get a forecast for that. And you can see here now where treatments have been placed for each of the different elements. And another feature here in the latest version is that if you want to see what was the condition right before a treatment was triggered, you can just double click in that cell and it will show you all of the parameter values as it was right before that treatment or at the time when you click on that cell. So for example, I can click anywhere here and it will show me all of the modeled values. All right, so I'm going to stop here for this video. In the next video, we are going to look in more detail at the different components that make up the model configuration. And specifically, we are going to look at the domain model setup file, the project file, and explain what are the different sheets in each of these files, so that you have a better idea of how that configuration template actually works. So that's it for this video. Thanks for watching.